Hi, everybody. It's Tom Esch here with Esch Consulting on the new podcast, The Case for Construction Culture, How to Balance Safety and Profitability. And I am super excited today because I'm here with Brent Darnell, a friend of mine, a colleague, a mentor, a guy who I consider down the road in his work world 10, 15 years from where I've been. He's been doing it longer. He's got a really rich history of clients and work he's done, and he's just a great guy. Brent, happy to have you on the podcast.
Tom, it's my pleasure. My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and I do want to say Brent is president, founder of Brent Darnell International, where he does coaching, training, a lot of the kind of work I do. And he's also founder and president of BDI Publishing. Did I say that right, Brent?
Yes, that's fine.
Brent published my book, my one and only book, and has been really helpful to me over the years that I've known him. So I'm excited to talk about culture with you, talk about leadership with you, Brent. You really are. I think Wally Adamczyk recently said you're the most emotionally intelligent trainer he's ever met, or something kind of grandiose like that. But I honestly think in the construction space, you clearly are a national leader. So I'll start off just asking you, Brent, how would you define culture in terms of the worlds in which you work, which I know is not only but largely construction?
Hmm. Culture can be slippery sometimes, but
I
I
know.
see it as sort of repetitious behaviors, repetitious processes in place, as well as putting people first so that when people come to work, they feel like they belong there. Uh, and if you get that sense of belonging through the processes that you have, the approach that you have with people first, and all of those cultural things that you do every day that contribute to the overall culture, I think you've nailed culture. And I think the problem with most companies is it's hard to define it. It's hard to get it's sort of like, when you see it, you know what it is,
Mhm,
and you know what it isn't, but it's
mhm.
hard to have a process sitting there that says, okay, we're going to start doing this and have great culture. It's a little bit of an art, I think.
Mhm.
But one thing that's true for everything, no matter what those variables are, is the
Uh-huh.
focus on people and their well-being and their sense of belonging. I think that's the foundation for all great cultures.
People first, well-being and belonging. I love that. I've done a number of these now, and I'm not hearing the words well-being and belonging very much. And I'm
Huh.
not surprised that Brent Darnell would be the guy, one of the first to start talking about belonging and well-being and the importance of people, and I would add relationships, which is what I hear you talking about, Brent, and it's what you're so
Yes.
naturally good at. When we take care of the relational stuff, so many other things fall into place.
Mhm.
Do you
Yeah.
find that true even when you're building culture and trying to create good culture?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about it, most of our processes are automated. It's data, it's apps, it's software, it's platforms they're driven by that. But if you don't get the people stuff right, it's all for nothing, right? So I think you
Yes.
got to start with the people stuff first. That's first for everything. That's for first for high performing teams. That's first for culture in a company. That's first for everything, is that human connection, and get your people really good at that part of it. And then the other stuff you'll figure out, and you'll
Hmm.
use that data, use that software, use that platform. But if you get into trouble with that, you can always connect with on that human level and get it worked out.
I love it when engineers talk about people first, Brent, and I have to notice the Georgia Tech logo behind your head there because my nephew, as you know, went to Georgia Tech and then played
Yeah.
professional baseball. So we share a Georgia Tech love there, the Yellow Jackets. But the fact that you're an engineer who talks about people and relationship first puts you in a fairly small group in my mind, or percentage. So many engineers are focused on what you first started talking about, repetitious behaviors and processes and sort of the science of
Right.
culture, the science of, which is super important. But it warms my heart to hear you talk about people first. Do you ever get pushback on that, or do you ever have challenges with
Oh,
that?
I've been doing. I've been doing this for 25 years now. The answer is yes. You almost always get pushback. The only time you don't get pushback is if people are in dire trouble. Like if their cultures are falling apart or their clients are saying, we don't like you guys very much,
Yeah,
you're kind of jerky to work with. You're
yeah,
great at what you do.
yeah.
You're obviously technically beyond reproach, but we just don't like you very much. And then they call me and say, how do you fix that? Right.
Can you, yeah, can you fix that? I get the question occasionally, and you and I probably both hesitate sometimes
Yeah.
on those calls, Brent, though I know your heart is generous. I'm imagining, like me, you want to say yes and you want to help them, and yeah, you want to dive in. What are the challenges when you get invited into a culture that may be really struggling? What are some of the common things? I know we could talk for 2 hours about that
Yeah.
question, but what?
Well, I think it's mainly about for most contractors and engineers, technically oriented people, they think the process will save the day.
Hmm.
So I think it's that focus on process and shifting that focus to a people first focus.
Hmm.
And that's difficult for some because they don't see an immediate return. They don't see
Hmm.
an immediate result. So
Hmm.
it's about, okay, if we get our people stuff right, then we'll figure out the process stuff. So there's always that pushback. But having said that, once people start embracing the concepts, it feeds on itself. It escalates on its own because people develop this common language and they develop common attitudes, and they'll say things in meetings like, "Oh, hey, how about a little empathy here?" Think of my point of view. So they start developing this common language, and then those little tiny shifts ultimately become over a pretty long period of time a change in culture.
Hmm. And how long? Let's say I'm a company of 100 people in the field. I know you work with larger companies, but if I have 150 people out in the field working, is this a 3 month thing, Brent? Is this a 6 week thing? Is this a 6 year? And I know there's 100 variables.
Yeah,
Let's say I'm
yeah,
a healthy enough culture with the common problems you and I see all the time. People don't communicate, Brent. They're not
yeah,
accountable. The guys are late. The veteran baby boomers are arguing with the 20-year-olds and accusing them of being lazy. And the guys
yeah.
are negative. And how long to change this, Brent, to get the rock star culture you can help me make
Well,
here?
again, a lot of variables, but I would say on an individual level, we start seeing behavioral shifts after about maybe 4 or 5 month mark.
Mm-hmm.
So we start to see shifts in behavior and that people first, using some empathy, connecting with others, communicating better. That's about a 4 to 5 month kind of a thing. That's with good accountability and follow up and some coaching and some development plans. And then we just say, okay, by about the 7, 8 month mark, it's pretty good, solid behavioral shift for many of the people. Some people lag behind, some people are way ahead. But in general, for a group, 8 or 9 months, that behavioral stuff's pretty solid. So we just give it another couple of months and we say a year-long program is a pretty good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
But then you want it to be more lifelong learning. So you want to check in once a year, take some evaluations, check in with what you're working on, your development plans, maybe tweak those so it becomes this lifelong learning process year to year instead of just a one off, even a long one off year
Mm-hmm.
long program. You want to keep it going. You want to develop that sense of becoming a lifelong learner and constantly looking for things to shift and change and be better at.
I like the lifelong learner, and it's good alliteration. Speaking of learning and excitement, Brent, what are you excited about here in 2025? Either things you're creating, I know some of what you're doing, but
Yeah.
what are you looking at? What are your
Well,
clients
I've
asking?
recently put all of my courses online on my new website. So they're really I had them custom done because the platforms that I wanted to use didn't do the things I wanted them to do. So I developed it custom, and so we've got lots of cool things. It's experiential, it's gamified, it's a lot like how I teach, and you know how I teach. It's very interactive and experiential learning processes. Same thing with the online courses. it's, a video here, and then an image here, and then an exercise here, and then a thought exercise here, and then so it really keeps the learner has to interact with the material. So you're not just sitting there watching an hour-long video. You have to interact with the stuff, which increases the learning. And at the end of every course, we have these quests that you go on to apply what you just learned. So that really reinforces the learning. And then the last quest of every quest list is teach somebody what you learned from this course. And if you can teach it, you probably know it pretty well.
I've looked at the beginnings of some of your courses, Brent, when you told me about it some months ago, and I was impressed. I'm not just making this up, people. If you get a chance, where do they find that, Brent?
Just BrentDarnell.com. Go to
That's
the
what
online courses.
that's what I
And by
thought.
the way, I'm looking for beta testers. If you want your company to be one of my beta testers, shoot me an email and I can set something up where we can get a few of your people to check these out and see what they think.
Yeah, I've looked at others, Brent, and I can honestly say yours is the best I've seen. I haven't looked
Well,
at all of
thank
them,
you.
but I've talked to others who have looked at a bunch and have told me Brent's is as good as anything out there, maybe better, and that's a high compliment. And in some ways, the bar isn't that high. Let's be honest, Brent.
Yeah.
There's a
Well,
lot of
thank you.
yeah,
Thank you for saying, and you're right, most online learning is really awful. It's
yeah,
either somebody talking for an hour over a PowerPoint deck, or they're in front of a whiteboard and it's a video of them. There's
yeah,
no interactivity. There's not really much of anything. It's just information. Well, you can just send me the paper on it. I don't need to
yeah,
sit in front of my screen for an hour to get a lot of information you just told me.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Say one of my other podcast guests is a guy you know that he won't mind me mention, David Watts, who's with
mm-hmm,
Skanska now
mm-hmm,
in New England. He talks about how do you, as a leader, Brent, when you're working, engaging as a trainer, as a coach, as a consultant, how do you help the leaders, especially some of the top leaders you work with, influence outcomes such as worker engagement, uh, quality worker safety? He talks a lot about what kind of training he'll ask the key
mm,
person at a given company, what's your training in influencing safety outcomes?
mm-hmm.
And there isn't a lot of training, and there isn't a lot of, and so much of our work is the work of influencing leaders
Right.
to create better outcomes. What are some of the challenges you see in the worlds that you're in with asking leaders about how they're either trained to do it or what training you offer them to influence outcomes, especially around safety and
Right.
quality
Well,
work?
it's difficult because I don't think they know. I don't think they have that awareness of what they're supposed to be doing or
Mm-hmm.
what they could be doing differently. Because almost invariably, when I ask a company, "Hey, what do you want the outcome to be for this training?" They have no idea. They go, "Oh, I don't know. They be I don't know. They'd be better leaders." And I'll say, "Well, what does that look like? What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want them to do better?"
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe communicate better. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think they even know. So I think as facilitators and as consultants, you and I think we have to guide them a little more deeply in that, and kind of tell
Mm-hmm.
them, what if we did this, and what if the outcomes for this, would that be beneficial? I think we have to feed them those things,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think they know, because it's never, nobody, like you said, nobody ever does it. How do we
Yeah.
do it? How do you, and safety, again, that's a very complex thing. You've got just, we've developed this whole primal safety program, one of the online courses, that talks about lifestyle choices and human connection.
Mm-hmm.
We ask, what affects cognition, what affects judgment, what affects our ability to connect with another human and care enough about them to say, to look out for them and to say, hey, why don't you tie off?
Mm-hmm.
So it's this complicated thing. And so again, but I think the foundation for that is to care about your people, and care about them as human beings, and tell them that you have their best interest at heart, and you want them to have a nice long life without disease, and you want them to retire healthy, and all of those things. To me, that's the beginning of a great safety culture. You get people caring about each other, and they work safer naturally.
Hmm.
So anyway, I mean, again, it's a complicated thing, but I think if you start with that human connection, I think it'll take you to the place you need to go as a company, whatever those things are for you that you're focused on.
Hmm. We're back to the human. I love it. It sounds
Yeah.
so simple, Brent. Can you tell a story of how it's either is so simple or maybe not so simple? Do you have a
Yeah.
story in your pocket of a change process you've been part of or initiated, maybe one that went very well or one that didn't go so well?
Well, I'll give you an example of each. We had a company in Salt Lake called Jacobson Construction, and they did a survey to their owners and potential owners, and they just said the things I said earlier. Hey, you're great. You're ethically beyond reproach. You're technically amazing. You're great builders, and we don't like you very much. And so they brought me in. So we did a 5 years of programming there. We literally took all 240 people through a year-long process.
Wow.
And it changed that culture. It became one of driven by relationships and driven by human connection and driven by people. And I can tell you multiple stories that they had where they got projects as a result of their connections and relationships, had nothing to do with their technical expertise. They
Wow.
started getting those kinds of multiple phases without bidding kind of stuff because of the relationships they created with their clients. So that was a real success story. But again, here's what happened. We started with the top leaders. We took them through the year. They knew the process. They supported everybody else that went through it after them. And that's what started shifting that culture. So they were bought in 100%. They said, we're going to take everybody through this. And they did. They spent a lot of money to do that.
Hmm.
And it reaped huge benefits for them.
Wow.
Um, so there's another company that didn't do as well. I won't say their name, but they're very process driven.
Hmm.
Like everything's a process. And one of the guys that I knew from a previous company started working there. He said, "Man, they got a checklist for everything, everything here."
Uh-huh.
Um, they didn't do as well. They had some individuals that did quite well because they saw the value and they did the work and they created the changes. But as a company, we kept butting up against that culture of um, a process-driven culture instead of a people-driven culture.
Hmm.
And so I think they got some good out of it, but I was disappointed, and I think they were a little bit as well. I think they wanted more of an impact.
Hmm.
But again, we kept bumping up against that culture, and it's hard to compete with that ingrained culture. It really is.
Really hard. Boy, I feel both stories. I've had similar stories of both, Brent. Great success. Things changed. We developed people. I never did well, I guess I have done a 5 year one, but not in the way you did it. But I certainly have had ones that didn't go so well. In fact, you and I
Mm-hmm.
worked on one that didn't have the results that you and I wanted.
Yeah.
And I eventually asked the owner there, I don't know if I told you this. I mean, they learned some things. They grew. They're grateful that we were able to help them. They really liked the work that you led and that we co-led. But they said they didn't get the results they wanted, and I asked why. And you may remember, I may have told you, but he said they didn't take us up on the individual coaching. All they did was the half day trainings. They did
Right.
a year long substantial investment of half day trainings with their top 18 people, but they didn't do any coaching to speak of. There was a one moment where you and I did a team project there on one situation that had a
Right.
real breakthrough. That one ended up well,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't. And the owner said to me, it was our fault, Tom. We didn't take you up on the coaching. I think that would
Mm-hmm.
have been a real difference. What have you learned about how training and coaching go hand in hand with these processes?
See, that's when we added the coaching component because we just kept changing things because things didn't work. Like we did the 1 day thing and it was a miserable failure. So then we said, okay, what if we checked in a month from now? Okay, well, we did better. Then I
Yeah,
say, okay, let's spread that to 6 months. And we got
yeah.
better results. And then we said, okay, how about 9 months? We got better results.
Yeah.
Then, oh, let's do accountability partners at the group. Okay, then we got better results. And then we added the individual coaching component, mandatory, at least once every quarter or so. And then that's when it sort of was an exponential increase in results. So I think the coaching is really important. And the thing that I'm trying to do now is to try to teach people to coach themselves, to do peer-to-peer coaching, and give them some tools to use to be able to, check out. Connect with somebody on that level, and peer-to-peer, just coach each other and help each other to be better. So
It's awesome. I love it. I love it. The mandatory coaching is always tricky because,
it
as
is.
you and I know, if you force a guy who does, or woman who does not want any coaching, that it can backfire. But I think I hear you saying that you put a high bar on the requirement that this is part of the whole. You're going to be part of this. You're going to do some coaching, one-on-one
Right.
coaching. And of course, that's not the whole company. It's just the key leaders, I'm guessing, right, Brent? You're not coaching
Yeah, well,
240 people.
yeah. I mean, we we did at least one mandatory session after the initial like introduction to emotional intelligence. They create the development plans. We did
Yeah,
a session for each person to
yeah,
say, hey, your plans are looking good. We can tweak it here just to make sure that they're on the right track. And then
sure.
one toward the end of the program. Those were mandatory, but we're available basically 24/7. I mean, don't call me at 3 in the morning, but I'm available anytime if you want help or guidance or just run something past me. I'm available.
And people, if you don't know Brent Darnell, he is not making that up, because he has been available to me by text, by phone call, many times over the last several years that we've been working together on and off. Any final thoughts you have, Brent, about culture, about leadership, about what you're excited about? Any final thoughts here?
I'm excited for the industry. I think there's a lot of really incredible younger folks coming in the industry that want to see the change,
Mhm.
and they have the ability and they have the drive to create those changes. I think we need to help them as much as we can and sort of get out of their way and let them do the things instead of trying to figure out, you know, hey, we've always done it this way. How many times do you hear that?
Yeah,
I think we need some disruptive kind of stuff for design, for technology, for all those cutting edge things of modularization and prefabrication and 3D printing and all those things. Well, I think we need to bring all that to bear, and I think the younger people are wanting to do that, and we need to get out of their way and let them.
I love it. Disruptive stuff. Should we have disruptive stuff around the critical people skills too, Brent?
I think we should. I mean, think about it this way. Think about 10 years ago, if you talked about mental health and well being,
Mm-hmm.
you would have been looked at like a
Yeah. What are you talking about?
frou-frou. Oh, we
Yeah.
don't need that stupid crap. What are you
Yeah.
talking about? Um, and I think now it's starting to move itself into mainstream because they're realizing that if they're people, here's what I always say: how can you have a high performing team if you don't have high performing people? So all of our stuff focuses on stress and sleep and nutrition and exercise and all those things that contributed to performance and longevity. And if you don't have that and you're not teaching your people that, then you have less than the highest levels of performance. So that's what we focus on: highest levels of mental, physical, and emotional performance, sort of like training your folks like professional athletes. That's the way we should be approaching this.
Mm.
And my guess is 10 years from now, it's going to be the norm.
Yeah. I love it. The self-care, the mental health, fewer and fewer people can deny this is a real issue in construction, in the
Yeah,
trades. I mean,
yeah,
everywhere really, but it's especially tough in the trades. As
it
you and I
is.
know, the suicide numbers are unusually high. And I'm
Yeah.
inspired to see people like you, people like Wally Adamczyk and others at the mental health conference coming up, doing so much good work. So, Brent, I so much appreciate you as a friend and colleague, and I also appreciate the short time to share here. I think we're going to wrap up the culture, the case for construction culture, and say thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Right back at you. I value what you're doing, and I value your friendship as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Brent.